Now, we all want a good deal when it comes to buying an e-mountain bike, but we also want that bike to be up for the task in hand. So today we're going to take a look at all the things you need to be looking out for when it comes to buying an entry-level e-mountain bike. One thing I do know is they're a great way of getting into the sport of e-bikes without breaking the bank. And price-wise, you're going to be looking at around a minimum of £1,000, all the way up to £3,000 for that basic entry-level e-bike. There's lots of different factors that come in when it comes to price. The motors, the battery, and the display system is all going to come into play when we're talking about price. Now, this is a Decathlon bike, and it is a basic entry-level e-mountain bike, and it costs £1,000. And talking of basics, let's take a look at some of those basic things you need to look out for on these cheaper bikes. And they're mostly going to be hardtail frames, no suspension at the rear, but a suspension fork up front. Most likely going to be a rear hub drive, but there are some mid-drive options available too. Less expensive parts and components. And that frame material is likely to be alloy rather than carbon fiber. And smaller capacity batteries over those more expensive models. And lastly, they're going to be more suited to gravel tracks than true off-road technical terrain. And there's also some key questions you need to ask yourself. What is your budget? You need to work out the running costs of these bikes. It can increase if you're using them regularly or in bad conditions. Where are you going to ride? Will it have an effect on the suitability of the bike chosen? How often will you ride? What type of riding might you be doing in 6 months' time? You might want to upgrade sooner than you think. Where am I going to buy the bike? Will it be fit for purpose? Will it spend more time being fixed than being ridden? Will your intended upgrades cost more than the next model up in the range? Or should I go for a new hardtail or a second-hand full suspension bike? So there's a few distinctive features when it comes to buying these less expensive e-mountain bikes that you definitely need to consider. Number one on that list is going to be the hub drive motor. Rear hub drive bikes are great for general riding, but are limited in their off-road potential, particularly on steeper climbs. Cost-wise, here in the UK, Decathlon do this Rock Rider bike, which is going to cost you around £1,000. Then there are the mid-drive bikes. Now, these are a lot more sophisticated than those hub drive models, and they are better for riding off-road, and definitely better when it comes to hill climbing. They're also a lot more balanced and have that weight down nice and low, and in general, a bit more bulletproof than the hub drive models. Now, cost of these bikes, well, you can get a basic mid-drive bike for around £2,000. But this Scott bike, this is coming in at around £3,000. And when you get into that price bracket, it could be worth considering a basic full suspension e-mountain bike. Less expensive bikes tend to have very basic suspension on them, so we really recommend going for that hardtail e-mountain bike with a fairly decent fork on there compared to a cheap full suspension e-mountain bike, which is definitely going to have very compromised suspension front and rear. And then there's the cost of the bikes themselves. Now, these bikes tend to kick off at around £1,500 to £3,000 for a basic mid-drive bike. But if you creep above this price bracket, then you maybe want to start considering a basic full suspension e-mountain bike. Now, you can, of course, build your own e-mountain bike. All you're going to need is a mountain bike and an e-bike kit to strap to it, consisting of the motor, the battery, and the drive unit. Talking to the drive unit, these can be mid-drive or hub drive options, both very capable in fairly tame off-road situations and, of course, on the tarmac. Now, cost-wise, these cost about £500 to £700, and you must be pretty good at fitting electrical components to a bike. If not, you need to factor that in and add it to your cost. So where are you going to buy your e-mountain bike from? Well, your local bike shop is definitely worth taking a look. They usually have loads of bikes in stock, different sizes, and they could be ready to go that day. And of course, they might knock a few quid off if you're really good buddies with them, or maybe feed them enough coffee and cake. And you've got that support. If something was to go wrong with your e-bike, pop in and maybe you can get it fixed the same day. And if you're not a regular face at your local bike shop and want to save a bit of cash, a great way of doing this is to head into the store or maybe have a look online for end of model year bikes. Now, this is where manufacturers change the colors and the paintwork of those bikes in just a few components. Sometimes it's not a huge change from that previous year's model. And last on the list of saving some cash can be looking out for those ex-demo bikes. Now, a lot of big bike shops and bike companies will have a fleet of demo bikes they take around all over the country for customers to try out. Different specs, different sizes, different colors, and these can often be picked up at the end of the year for some great prices. And some of them will have warranty and a guarantee in place still too. Buying a second-hand bike is definitely a good option too. You might get lucky and buy a bike with a transferable warranty that comes in place with it. But if it hasn't got a warranty, it isn't usually a problem because there's plenty of third-party companies out there that can fix most poorly e-bikes. Now, buying second-hand is a great way of saving cash. Now, you could probably buy a used full suspension bike for the same price as a brand new e-hardtail off of the shop floor. Just be sure when you are buying secondhand to look out for damage on those expensive electrical components. Things like the motor, the battery, and the display unit can all be pretty costly to replace. And then of course, look at the person you're buying it from. Is it too good to be true? Because it probably is. If the charger is missing, or the battery, or the locks have been hacked, it's probably not a great idea. And don't forget, on some of those more expensive bikes, they could have apps that are going to be a great insight onto how that bike has been looked after, how many miles it's done, how many charges the battery has done, and loads of great info in those apps. And if you are looking to buy a new e-mountain bike, it's really worth asking your friends, your family, or even your local cycling club. A lot of these riders like to update their kit regularly and might trigger a sale just by simply asking. And don't forget social media too, loads of bikes on there, but just use your head to make sure you're not buying a stolen bike. And lastly, the internet can definitely be your friend when it comes to buying that cheap e-mountain bike. You can use it for reviews on bikes, or maybe even find that secondhand bike that you've always dreamt of, or maybe search out those bargains from online retailers. And a great way of finding out a bargain is to search the best e-bike of the few previous years and see if there are any kicking around that can be purchased at a huge saving for a great bike. So there we are, a few tips to help you get the best out of buying a cheap e-mountain bike. As I mentioned, they're a load of fun and a great way of getting into the sport of e-mountain biking without splashing a load of cash. Definitely some bargains to be had. Let us know if you picked up an e-bike bargain and how you did it in the comments box down below. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to us here on EMBN, and we shall see you out in the hills.